Greetings, folks. Here we are with another From the Tomes episode. As promised, special guest Alyssa Yeager, who we'll be talking to in a moment. I'll start by hitting you with my usual spiel for the start of the stream. And I just said I have this nice mouse here I never use, and I'm there playing with the trackpad. So all you see is my hand. So you're watching From the Tomes on Twitch TV From the Tomes. If you're here, you know where it is. If you are watching this on YouTube and you want to get in on live chats and see stuff real time, go ahead over to Twitch. If you are not subscribed already to the Fox and Boar channel on YouTube, please do that at foxandboargames.com. And also Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at foxandboargames.com. And we also have www.foxandboargames.com. Big thanks. Big thanks to everyone who has liked, subscribed, followed up until now. As you know, there is custom content also coming on YouTube. There are already some game playthroughs up there for Tales of the Hard Land, which have been getting some play, and I'm very excited about that. So thanks to everybody who's been watching that. Thanks to everybody for liking, subscribing, and following. And tonight's going to break our usual format. Usually you get me as a talking head for about an hour, and people chat and carry on fun discussions, and I respond to the questions. And I'm absolutely still game for that. We definitely want people, if you're out there watching, and if you are out there enjoying the stream, feel free to say hi and chat. But there's also, of course, as always, no pressure to do so. You are welcome to just lurk as well. We like that as well. But I think we'll get started. I'll be talking to it's Neil. Hello, Neil. Neil, you met Alyssa. You met Neil at PAX. Yes. So, thanks for tuning in, Neil. And I guess we're just gonna start. Mm-hmm. So we've known each other a while. We're pretty familiar with how we work, how the other person works. We've collaborated on a couple things.
Indeed.
So why don't you just start by telling us about Rhiannon's Lark and your music in general for people who haven't. There's Wolfie, there's Curzon. Hey guys, what's up?
Hey everybody. So I was just thinking, this is weird to be like doing an in-person chat together.
It is, isn't it? Because normally
the last couple of years, it's like we're both, in different states, and we're chatting together online, and so now it's like I can actually turn and you're there. Yeah. So my name is Alyssa Yeager. I've been playing music professionally since about 2007. I'm also a certified music therapist. And prior to Rhiannon's Lark, I was doing a duo out in Cleveland called Telling Point, and we focused mostly on pagan festivals. It was myself and a tribal rock drummer. So when I moved back to New York, I had to figure out, okay, where do I want to take my music as a solo performer? And I talked to my then boyfriend, now husband, about it, and the different aspects of things that sort of inspire me, and sort of fell on this Rhiannon's Lark, which my tagline for it is music from a geek goddess girl. So, people say, write what you know, whether it's music or books or whatever. And those are the things that I know pretty well. Geekdom in the form of a lot of, nerdery and pop culture, and goddess in the form of alternative religions and Eastern philosophies. And then just being a girl, being who I am, and exploring whatever that might bring to the table.
Yeah, cool. Good. It's a great summary. So how'd you get into the geek scene, gaming, cons, and all that?
I think I was born into it because
that's what happens. Yeah.
We sort of joke, but also we're a little bit serious that my parents wanted to have 2 kids so they could have 4 people to play team games at the table.
Aha. Okay.
So we got raised with those little plastic card holders before we could actually have a hand of cards in our hands because we were too little.
Okay.
And so we grew up with some of the standard like Milton Bradley, Hasbro games and stuff. But as we were old enough, it was lots of card games. So we did, Pinochle and Hearts and Botticelli and all that kind of stuff. And so that was really that's where my gaming began, probably at 5-6 years old. And as games became more prevalent in the world, there was more to explore. And certainly, I want to say maybe when I was in college or grad school is when the explosion of more of the Euro games was just beginning, and so there was just so much more variety out there to choose from, and I've always kind of gravitated towards other people who play games. For me, like being a little bit socially anxious, it's a great way to sit down and do something with people and also socialize without just like staring at each other and having nothing to do with your hands.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit on a couple things I thought were really interesting there. And the first of which is growing up with games. And I was going to make the joke, oh, I guess not Warhammer then, right? Like, but what's funny now is you're seeing young people who are like, oh yeah, I play Warhammer with my father, you know? And it's like so different than it would have been 20, 30 years ago, where most of our first contact with games would have been these very common board games. And, you know, how that interfaced with family life, and then it kind of extends off of that. So the other thing you marked on, I think we still see that, and I think we've talked about this, and I know I've talked about this on this channel, that one things that RPGs do is they do provide a way for people who do have trouble interacting with each other in the real world or with other people in the real world to then interface. And when we all grew up, and we've talked about this because I think the guys who are on now, who I know personally, and other people who've come on have all stated like, yeah, like you go to a game con and everybody's neurodivergent, right? Like everybody is either probably has some social anxiety, everybody has some sort of awkwardness, everybody has maybe a slight bit of spectrum-y behavior. But in the RPG world, it's always been that way. It's always been tolerated. You just know everybody's eccentric or weird or whatever you want to, not weird in a bad way, but eccentric, different, and you just deal with it. Yeah. So I think that's a commonality. So how about RPGs?
I think, you know, if RPGs had been a more prominent thing like a little bit sooner, I feel like that's something my dad would have loved to have run for us.
Okay.
Because we used to play, I don't remember any details, but we used to play this game that he called the Stone Master. Okay. And that was basically, we would go out into the backyard, and all I remember is that at some point in the game we had to collect stones and bring them to the Stone Master. But everything else he just made up as we went along.
Like a proto-LARP, right?
He's just like, you know, sending us off on tasks and having fun. That's basically, super creative. That's my parents both raised me reading a lot of fantasy and sci-fi. That's what they were into. And so it's interesting that, you know, looking back on that, I almost wish, you know, we had gotten into that kind of thing as a family too. But I actually didn't. I played my first RPG like late in high school, like junior, senior year of high school. A friend of mine asked if a few of us who had never played before, like, do you want to try it?
Sure.
And we're like, sure. And he had played a lot, and so he GM'd for us. And it's been sort of an on and off thing in my life. So I've been part of groups for like a couple of years straight, and then I've been part of like just, you know, little one-off or two-session kind of campaigns. And but it inspires a lot of songs.
We noticed.
For me.
Yes, I have noticed. So we've talked about this at length. At the end, of course, we'll point people to your stuff. But yeah, no. So that's kind of my next segue is. So how about the fusion of game cons, gaming, and music? Like, at what point was it the intersection of? Well, I'm just gonna go to a con and play music about barbarians. You know, like you know. But in a very like not like a Man-O-War type of way, right? Not like this theatrical like heavy metal way, but like, in a very folky, kind of accessible, family friendly way.
Very sweet and folky. Yeah, that's exactly. my niche.
Yeah.
I think the first major gaming con that I went to was PAX East.
Okay.
And that was before I was doing Rhiannon's Lark. That was just because, you know, I liked games, and my boyfriend was going, and a bunch of his friends were going, and we're like, so let's check it out. And, that one is a little more video game heavy than some of the other cons that I've done since then, but it's sort of developed simultaneously with the idea that we wanted to go to these cons together.
Right.
And because I was doing so much of that, you know, that's one of our typical things. Evening comes around, it's like, what do you want to do tonight? Do you want to play a video game? Right. Do you want to watch something? Or do you want to play a board game? And that's 90% of the time we're playing board games. Yeah. So that's what inspires me, and that's what I end up writing about a lot of the time. Yeah. And then I started applying to gaming conventions, and like Origins is a big one for me. I love that. I've done Gen Con and Dragon Con and lots of like little local events and stuff, which are an interesting
cool.
bag.
Very cool. I thought that, of course, went right out of my head in terms of all that. So let's go on to the next thing. What's your favorite game?
Oh, Well, that probably changes. Right now, I'm going to say Spirit Island. Aaron and I, my husband, have been playing the heck out of Spirit Island.
Yeah.
We tried it years ago. I think it was at Gen Con. They were doing a demo. And I kind of want to say the person who was demoing it was not so good at demoing it. But the general idea that they gave us is this is a really hard co-op game, which cool, because I like co-op games and I like really challenging. If you win every time, like that's not that exciting for me, because then what's the challenge and what's the excitement of winning? But in this case of the demo, like within 10 minutes, we were wiped off the board, which is not really enough time to get a feel for how the game works. And they were giving us some pretty strong suggestions. Oh, you should do this. Oh, you should do that. I was like, well, clearly that's not
working. Clearly this isn't working, yeah.
But it took a couple years for us to kind of float back around to that, because we didn't have much of an idea of what it really was. And we started seeing more positive reviews. And so for Valentine's Day, I got that for him and I. And since then, we've gotten pretty much all the expansions that have come out. And
I recall playing it. Last time I was up at your place, that's where we spent the one night. And I remember it is really complicated.
I like the theming.
And I've talked about it with, I know a few of the people who are on tonight. I've talked about it with my colleague, Bill, who runs the game lab at school. And one of his concerns was that it was like extremely complicated. Like for a person who doesn't, because what we get a lot of are people who play a lot of video games but are only being introduced to board games. I'm like, but you know what? It's this really great idea of how to like create this like internal world in this board game. You know, you have this whole world, and that's what I thought was really cool about it.
It is a tough one to introduce.
I think we did pretty well when we played it, but I think you guys were pretty much guiding the action, and you were very experienced at it. So I didn't feel like I was getting mopped up by the game, you know. But
that's a challenge with co-op games. When we invite other people to play for the first time, you want to be helpful, but not too helpful. You know, I don't want to play somebody's game for them.
Right. So. Yeah, that's one thing we've had to caution people against. Like, don't let them play the game. Even if they lose, let them play the game. We've seen it a few things with things we've run here. I'm trying to remember my other game. Oh, okay. So back to the game cons, just because I kind of remembered the question now. What can you talk about specific experiences and how gamers seem to respond to your interface of gaming and music, and you know, any particularly memorable events that you can come up with? Okay.
So the events that are more gaming specific, like Origins is very heavy on games versus you know, something like Gen Con has a little bit of everything, and something like Dragon Con has like a little bit of everything. But in Origins, in addition to like concerts in a room, we also busk in the hallways. Okay. And so I play in the main hallway from people crossing over from the Hyatt into the convention area. So everybody walks by and hears, you know, a sentence out of a song. Sure. And so you wonder, you know, is it going to be enough to like
give us a sentence that is particularly attention catching.
I've got sheep for wood.
Okay, yeah, well that'll definitely, because everybody will recognize that too.
Or I'm addicted to X-Wing.
Okay, all right.
But it's hard. Like I don't want to keep playing those songs over and over and over again. Right. And I do a lot of story songs.
I was thinking Mouse Bomb to the Face would definitely catch attention, but that
I haven't
a little tough to play.
That live.
That's a little tough to play live in your format.
Maybe I'll get my studio guy to do a backing
I was going to say you need to hire a drummer just for that.
Remind me, because I'll tell a story about that in a minute.
Cool.
But actually this year, over the summer, I was playing a song about one of the characters in Gloomhaven. And it's a character that isn't revealed early in the game. And so I didn't play it a lot in the early days because I didn't want to spoil anything for people. But I'm playing this song about the Plague Herald on a ukulele. It's just, you know, like, doop, 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 doop. And this guy walks by, and I see him kind of like walk by and pause and look back. I'm like, okay, he must know Gloomhaven. And he comes back and he says, I really like that. You know, can I like tag you on Facebook or whatever? And I said, sure. Well, it turns out that was Price from Cephalofair Games.
I was just gonna say, was it a developer?
Yes.
I was like, so that would have been really funny.
It's his game, so it just totally made his day to randomly walk by and hear somebody singing a song about his character. There's a couple of times where I have traded a free copy of a game in exchange for me writing a song about it because you know, it's just you're getting started and you're trying to collaborate with people and get things off the ground together, and so
very cool. So what's your Mouse Bomb to the Face story?
So that was a song about the very final session of this 2-year campaign that we had wrapped up a while back. And long story short, because I won't get into all of what led up to a mouse bomb to the face, but it was almost this like sort of punk metal thing, which is not my usual style, but I did a bunch of backing tracks layered up before I did the vocals. And I'm singing it, I'm recording it at the house, and my husband and I both work from home now on opposite sides of the house. And he comes down, he's like, so it's really weird when you're working upstairs and you just hear your wife down there singing over and over again, mouse bomb to the face!
That's awesome.
It's like,
yeah, it's a little weird.
This is our life.
Do we want to play a bit of mouse bomb to the face? Is it some place where we can easily get to it?
I believe it is accessible for everybody on Patreon.
I couldn't remember if it was a Patreon.
Yeah, I don't think I've released it anywhere else.
All right.
But I don't think it's exclusive to followers.
I know you sent me a copy, but I
can't
remember.
I don't know if you would still have that.
I have no idea where it is. Like most things that I get from people.
Yeah.
Oh, you sent me that?
Rhiannon's Lark, yeah.
I wonder if I just search mouse bomb to the face.
Maybe. I wonder how many things would come up on the internet if you search mouse bomb to the face.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I wrote a song about Spirit Island.
Yeah, do you ever get to a point that you tend to think, oh, yeah, I have a lot of stuff. Like, what haven't I addressed yet? I mean, that's a good segue. Well, I guess while I'm doing this, like, what,
Yeah.
There's your Fortune Fire song. I like that.
Aaron was like, why haven't you written a song about Spirit Island yet? And it's, there it is.
There it is. There's nothing. Okay.
It's not always, like, the quantity of time that we're playing something. It's just certain games strike a chord, like something personal about them. Like I learned something about myself, or there was a particular character or a particular facet of the game that was inspiring in a way that made me want to write a song about it.
Well, that's an interesting point, though, because we didn't really talk about that. Like, like at what point do you decide, like, all right, this is worth. Yeah, this is what point am I going to write about?
To some degree, I mean, this is going to sound silly, but the song just comes to me a lot. So, like the title or the a line of the chorus will come to me. I'm like, oh, that's going to be a song. I wrote a song about this game based out of England called Waggle Dance. I played it once. We don't even own it, and I wrote a song about it just because the tiebreaker at the end is usually irrelevant. Like, how often do you actually tie with people at the end?
Right.
But in this case, we were playing a 4-player game. 3 of us tied at the end. And so the tiebreaker was really significant. And so I wrote a song that at the very end, like, pulls in the significance of the tiebreaker. It just struck me as something unusual. And so
So it's usually like an event while playing or while thinking about the game that you kind of decide, okay, I'm gonna write it.
One of the songs, if I play later, I'll tell you like my personal connection to that.
That's why I'm trying not to jump too far ahead of the conversation. I know we'll probably talk about
I got
that
plenty of examples.
Yeah. Mouse bomb to the face. So we'll play just a minute or so.
Yeah.
It's definitely not your normal style. Hey, Peach, what's up? So we had a lot of fun recording that.
I did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember you telling me about it in text. I'm like, okay, sure. We'll go with my bomb to the face. Yeah, let's do that. Perfect. What we really need is a drummer to do this live. Because they're so easy to find. Of course, you do live with one.
At film conventions.
Well, at film conventions, you probably could definitely find some. But you do live with someone who plays drums,
I do.
Too.
He doesn't want to get on stage.
I know he doesn't. Yeah. Well, I know that. This needs a video too. That'll be the next project. We won't get to work on the video that we were going to while she's here, unfortunately. But it'll be a forward-thinking project.
This could be a great animation.
This would be a great animation. I could probably find people who can do that.
You're almost over.
Yeah. I'm wondering how this comes over also. That's hilarious. That's awesome. So how do
it's always interesting, like, you get together with other people and you're like, how was your day? And, I had this meeting at work. It was really boring. I'm like, I wrote a song about chickens and like mice bombs.
Donkeys. Donkeys are another thematic.
This is my life.
So just so everybody knows, we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but this is in fact Alyssa's Patreon, but we will get to all that. We will get to all that a little bit later. So I guess we'll go back to a little bit of chat. I'll drop down my like, subscribe. So talk about the goddess part in Geek Goddess Girl. We covered the geek part pretty thoroughly.
Yeah. So I got a lot of exposure to the pagan festival circuit when I was playing in my band in Cleveland, and just really resonated with a lot of the aspects of the culture, the ritual. I don't necessarily consider myself of a specific religion, but I just appreciate a lot of the aspects of the spirituality, especially the connection with nature and that power of Mother Earth and all of that, elemental magic and that sort of thing. So there are definitely a few very spiritual pieces. Like one of the pieces on the new album is about the winter solstice. And then there's a lot that just sort of have my perspective on things, which contains that sort of underlying,
the ethos.
Perspective of,
sure.
Yeah. So it's interesting, like, I was sort of bringing my husband, when we were dating, I was bringing him to pagan festivals. He was sort of bringing me, we were bringing each other to gaming festivals. And we were like, these are very similar.
There's a big crossover.
There is a big crossover. I remember
going to one heathen event and pretty much all we talked about was D&D and beer. That was like, we didn't talk about anything mystical or no pagan gods or nothing.
Some of them don't know it.
It was all about D&D and beer, and that was just about the entire convention.
I feel like there's people there like, they don't realize they're pagans underneath, or they don't realize they're gamer nerds, But they're there.
There's always been a weird thread through. Like, I remember early on at one of the LARPs, talking to one of the LARP players. PJ, I'm sure, in fact, knows exactly who this is, but I can't remember the guy's name. And he starts, telling me about focusing this energy and, it's more to life than D&D and beer. Yeah, no, exactly. There's not much. But this guy he had his whole mystical character, and then I stopped by his hotel room to talk to him about his character, and he's doing I guess a form of meditation with two swords, and he starts proceeding to tell me about his mystical pursuit in real life, and I'm like, yeah, this is like, there's this crossover here. And in fact, that's how we met, was through pagan events, which is ironic that we're here doing gaming stuff.
It's all together.
It's all tied together. Did you contact us when I was doing Central New York, or did we contact you? I don't remember. I can't remember if I found you and then said, hey, I'm running the music at this event.
I've been trying to remember
Yeah, I don't recall
because I think the first time we actually met was I was working on the album, and I said, hey, do you want to do some pipes on this song? Can I come down and record it?
I was like, okay, that was easy, sure. And I remember at the time, it was like, just let you know I'm 4 hours away. You're like, oh, okay, we'll figure it out.
Because I think I was playing this one day, nerdy downtown state thing.
Up in New Jersey, northwest Jersey, and where I teach is where we did the recording.
Like a sci-fi day or something.
Yeah. Cool. So, and not to gloss over the goddess part, but I don't know how much more there is to really interface with that in terms of the discussion here that's predominantly gaming centric, except that there is a huge crossover in the two scenes. And back to our discussion right before this, you're a woman who's into gaming. You've been into gaming a long time. How do you feel that has affected your experiences in gaming culture? Have you had the experience of that affecting the way people interact with you at gaming conventions, at gaming events?
Very little, fortunately, because I hear a lot of stories about, fake geek girl and all this nonsense. I'm like, what? Right. I'm not gonna go on a diatribe about that, but I think partly because I did grow up in this. It wasn't like something that I discovered as a teenager or a young adult and like tried to ease into and didn't feel comfortable with. Like, I have been playing games forever, since before I had any friends that I could remember who they were. So I don't need anybody else to accept me into this genre. Like, I'm already here. I don't really care if you don't accept me or not. But what you were saying before, I think, is spot on. Before I was performing, I was doing vending at gaming conventions.
I was gonna bring up the die witch. That's what I was. When I said comms before, I'm saying like, what was the other thing I was gonna mention? And that was it. That was exactly it.
And I think a lot of people came up to me and maybe approached me a little bit differently, but not in a bad way. Like, as someone who might be more willing to listen to them because I was a woman, and maybe wouldn't like shun them or whatever. Sure. Or come off with some like bro attitude of you don't really fit in with me. People who were on the spectrum, people who like you were saying, everybody is sort of on the fringe in the gaming community. Absolutely. So there isn't like a fringe because we are all different.
Except for these guys, they're all really normal. Everyone who's here on this chat is so normal you wouldn't believe it.
I wouldn't believe it.
Well, you've met Curzon. You've met Tom. You met Tom at a dinner when we went to dinner at PAX.
Normal until you scratch the surface.
Normal until you met Neil, yeah.
I think just, it was interesting to... I felt like I was more approachable to them as a woman, I guess. So that was a good thing. I did have one experience that... at this year's Origins, which I don't think was necessarily because I'm a woman, but because I was singing a song about women's rights.
I remember,
and there was a guy who came up to me and said, well, if you feel strongly about bodily autonomy, then how do you feel about forced vaccination?
Right.
And I was hired to perform at this convention, so I wasn't going to go off on that. And that's a very complicated topic. But so... Back to the original answer, I have not ever felt like ostracized or questioned because of my gender.
And do you think that the culture, have you noticed a change in the culture either towards you or towards women specifically since you started gaming?
I think definitely just towards more diversity, so that, certainly includes women and just, all of your orientations, religious, sexual, gender, all that kind of stuff. And I do hear a little bit of pushback. Like, there's always somebody who is, nostalgic for like, this is the way it used to be. Why do we have to like change all of our gaming constraints and stuff because of these people? It's like, well, you don't. You can play any. You want to go back and play like 80s D&D. Do that. Like, nobody cares.
With all the toxic macho stuff that,
I don't care if you want to do that. Like,
exactly, right.
I also don't... I don't necessarily feel like being a type of character means that that's how you feel about people in real life. Like, a character can have a total, bias against another character, culture, whatever, and that doesn't mean that you are a racist
Right.
It's something you're exploring. Yeah. But I think it's just great that there is diversity there because people appreciate it.
Well, it's funny, I'm laughing because in our Warhammer game, both Tom and I play these completely single-minded religious fanatics. And it's hilarious because it's so not who we ever even want to be or meet in real life, but playing these two characters is just absolutely ridiculous. So let's just look at a couple of comments. So PJ says he's super normal, and I can attest to that. He's known him for 30 years. I can attest to how normal he is. Yeah, PJ, thanks for the creator shout out. We can talk about metal in a little while. We'll get through this and but yeah, I thought you'd appreciate my finally getting to that show. But so Gatekeeping Ludicrous, when I was first getting the videos, yeah, 20 to 40 people.
Nice.
Half those women. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's always kind of the joke. Like there was a joke made, I think, in our last game session that, several of the people here and I used to spend our Saturdays in a basement with each other and, not a woman in sight for miles, and then Diana made the comment, I bet you wouldn't want to be there. I'm like, no, we wanted women to come play. They wouldn't come anywhere near us, but, we really wanted them to come play with us. So I always find it really bizarre. And, it goes along with insecurity and toxic culture of people who don't want more diversity, whether it's gender diversity, whether it's orientation diversity. And I'm just thrilled. I'm kind of thrilled that gaming, particularly D&D, has definitely become co-opted by LGBTQ culture, by trans culture, and they're kind of inverting that whole narrative now. And and it's great that they've managed to say, okay, well, first of all, right, if you want to sit at home with your friends and play D&D like you played it 40 years ago, that's great. No, I would never tell anybody not to do that, but it's great that there's also this other whole trajectory coming into the scene.
Everybody gets a choice.
Yeah. And again, it's, I have fortunately, and again, where I teach is in a very tolerant area. It's a very tolerant, the idea that gaming has to be them and us. That's everything though, right? Yeah. That's human nature, and it's just this bizarre.
That comment actually ties right in. I was just thinking, my husband has sort of that.
He stole games from his basement. Yeah, good.
Has that perspective on it, like when he grew up playing games, they were the nerdy kids and they were ostracized and beat up and all that kind of stuff, and so that sense of we had to deal with the suckiness of it. How come it's so easy for everybody now? But
I'm thrilled, and I'm absolutely thrilled that people. And I've joked around that, like, okay, now it's become a celebrity fad, right? And it has, to some degree. But you're also finding out through all these celebrities, like Blake has mentioned, like 2 or 3 football players who stream, where they've been playing D&D for years. They just never wanted to talk about it. These are pro football players, right? Like, they've never wanted to admit that they were into this because it was such a stigma for so long.
Well, and Aaron always used to say, it's like, why was it cool to memorize the stats on some baseball player's cards, but not cool to memorize the stats on a Magic card?
Right. Well, and the joke was we always used to say, well, how come these guys get paid this millions of dollars for playing a football game, yet we don't get to do that for playing RPGs? And I'm like, oh wait, but now people are, and it's like maybe not at the same scale, but it is there. Yeah. It is there, and I don't think it's bad. I think it's just another iteration of it. I mean, I'm thrilled. I can sit here and do these podcasts, and people watch me sit and write a game. Like,
someday it'll be millions.
Millions. Someday it'll be millions. starting with my core, I'd say more minority voices and more musician. Yeah, well, and that. A lot of that has to do with your own personal perspective, cultural perspective. We had a whole conversation on our private text thread earlier of Gary Gygax as TERF. Because it of course has come out that his attitudes were definitely not liberal. His attitudes were definitely not progressive. He was also a middle-aged, then older guy in the 90s who grew up in the Midwest and never had to deal with people who weren't like him, And a lot of times people aren't this way because they're mean. They're like this because they've never had the exposure. And living in a semi-rural area and having neighbors who have never lived more than 5 miles away, you can see it. They're not evil people. They're not out to hurt anybody, but they have these attitudes because they don't have the exposure. Yep. So, yeah. So it's yeah. Indoor kids. Yeah, I never wanted to go out on recess. I wanted to sit and read my fantasy books. Yeah. So it's good you haven't had that experience of feeling ostracized. It's good you haven't ever really felt that. But I also think it's kind of hard to say, oh, you're just jumping on this as a trend when you show up with a repertoire of like 50 songs on gaming. Again, that's kind of hard to argue with. That's kind of hard. So before we kind of wrap into some of the other topics, so you also do Filk.
I do.
And until we really started talking, I really wasn't fully cognizant of what Filk was. One of my other friends who's also a girl gamer of almost 50 years or just about 50 years and a musician. You were at her house, Wendy. Mm-hmm. Wendy does a lot of Filk stuff or has been in a lot of Filk circles too. And so she would occasionally mention it, and I'd kind of like, because I didn't know what it was, I tuned it out. So why don't you talk about that for folks who don't know what Filk is?
Well, I'm part of a panel on Saturday morning about what is folk. And everybody has a different definition, but it's really a musical community. So it starts out with the idea of songs about fandom, and that's, sci-fi, fantasy, nerdery, geekery, pop culture, whatever. Like anything that you're a fan of. People refer to things like, a lot of the Zeppelin music as filkish because he's writing about Middle
Lord
Earth.
Lord of the Rings, right? Yeah.
So that would be like a filk type song. When I first heard about it, so I started the Rhiannon's Lark project, and it was probably like, I want to say about 2 years in that I played Origins for the first time, and one of the other musicians there was Tom Smith, and he's huge in the filk community. And he was telling me like, oh, you should check out these filk conventions. And I didn't have the right understanding of what filk was at the time. And from what I had heard about it, it was specifically just comedy songs, and it was always parodies.
Yeah.
And I did have a couple of those, but most of my songs are not parodies, and a lot of them are not comedy. And I felt like, well, that might be pigeonholing a little too much. I don't know if I could do a full hour and have people appreciate that, and so I didn't really get into it. And then all of a sudden, like, I think MarsCon was probably part of my intro into that, and doing more like filk circles and this late night filk and cookies thing that they do. And it really is just, it's a community of people. And so you start out with like a song about a fandom, but then once they like your music, they want to hear about your grandfather your recess time and whatever it is you're writing about.
I think we see a lot of that too, that there is this segue of becoming interested in what someone does through a niche and then kind of expanding. And I think you probably feel the same way. The hope to me always is that expands their mind, especially if they're coming from a different perspective or something like that.
And this tends to be a very welcoming, embracing community. Yeah. And so they are just like, oh, other people who want to play music. And they just, they sit in a room together and make music for hours and hours. Yeah. And there's like so much just wit and like great, on the spot lyrics and puns and all this kind of stuff, and just appreciation of the music that people get together and share.
Well, it's funny because we were saying about Led Zeppelin. I'm sure now PJ could name probably 24 power metal bands or heavy metal bands that are basically filk bands, because they basically have, or symphonic metal. They have entire like catalogs about Middle Earth, and that's basically, or catalogs about Conan the Barbarian or some adjacent, geek related thing. And that was always kind of our joke in playing the folk metal band. It's like, we're basically just people who just aren't playing D&D tonight and instead decide to get together and do this, We
had some instruments.
It's kind of an extension of D&D only with instruments. So that was Hawkmoon. Yeah, Hawkmoon's another one, absolutely. Wait, this is the most feared raiding culture, like Mongols mixed with Viking meet with PCP and then I figured out the door. Oh, yeah. Blind Guardian, yeah, exactly. Twilight over Middle, Twilight on Middle Earth. It's basically an entire album about Middle Earth. Cool. So why don't you tell us about what you're doing now? Talk about the new album. Talk about PhilCon.
So I am doing a Kickstarter for a new album that's going to open up next month, and the album is called Cylinder Becomes Unicorn, which I recorded last month. And it's the song itself, the title track for the album, was inspired after visiting my parents one time and realizing that the person I'm starting to become, I feel this need to like bottle it up and draw back and be the person I used to be when I'm around, people that I grew up with or people that just have a very strict definition in their mind of who I am. So it's this idea of, I started out as this just nice little round cylinder and everything was right and tight.
Everything's right and everything's normal.
Everything's pretty and polished. And then, it just sort of expanded into this crazy ass unicorn.
Right.
I'm not going to be that cylinder again.
No,
I'm not going to let other people make me that cylinder again. What I'm really excited about with this album is the previous album was all about like chaos and craziness during the pandemic. And there was a lot of hope and optimism in it, but it was a lot of heavy topics. And this one is so much more joyful and fun and like me 2 years later. So I'm just loving.
You're coming full unicorn form.
I am.
Full unicorn. Perfect.
All sparkly.
Yeah, sparkling. So your Kickstarter, is it live?
It is not live, but the link is, there's a pre-save link that is on my website.
Okay. All right. So if you go to the website, which we will share fully at the end, we will take a look at that. So what else are you up to? You're going to PhilCon this weekend.
So PhilCon, I have never been, but I live up towards Albany, New York, so Philly is not far, and this convention is like a sci-fi fantasy convention. So there will be games and cosplay and music and a lot of writers and artists and stuff like that. So I'm gonna check it out, do a little performing, do a little panel speaking.
Very cool.
Do a little dressing up as a T-Rex.
Very good. Yeah, so it's actually in Cherry Hill, New Jersey,
yes,
right?
Yep.
So it's not far from, I think, maybe one of the two of the people. Maybe not. Actually, maybe not now. It's not. It's about 45 minutes from here, about an hour here from what I can.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I think I've heard about it, but I've never actually been. And I've generally never haven't been going to sci-fi cons a lot. I've generally always focused on game specific stuff. So that's probably why it wasn't really on my radar.
I'll have to report back.
Report back, because if it's a thing, then maybe next year I'll make it a thing. Yeah. You're not going to do PAX Unplugged, right?
Not this year.
Not this year. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'll be there, and I'll spam that over the next couple of weeks. How about the new album? You just recorded a new live album.
Just recorded.
You've been doing a lot in the past few weeks.
Yeah. Good times. I mean, I like being busy. When I'm not doing original music, I'm doing folk music from the 50s and 60s. I play a lot of senior facilities, so I grew up listening to that on the radio. I love it, and it's nice to have an audience that appreciates it.
Yeah.
But I'm going to play a lot of songs off the new album this weekend, and we'll see how people respond.
Great. Cool. Yeah, if you go to PhilCon by any chance, if anybody watches this even after the fact, just go to PhilCon.
Come say hi.
Come say hi. Listen to some music. So I think what we'll do is I will go to your website, which I have.
Yeah, so pretty much anywhere, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. It's all at Rhiannon's Lark.
Yeah, and that's great. I'll go to the website itself though. And I want to say I think a few of the people who may watch this or who are watching this have in fact, let's see, was a member of the SOA?
Oh, yeah.
Foundation? Okay, all right.
I have done Council of Five Nations.
All right. So Schenectady, yeah. Currently in Springfield. So does anyone have any questions for Alyssa or any comments? She may do a song or two for us. We're going to have to take a little break and set up, but then we will be back. We'll do some music. But if in the meantime, anyone has any thoughts or any questions, feel free. Like I said, I know a couple of you met her last year.
While we're giving people a minute, because Council of Five Nations was mentioned, that was the first place I vended as the Dice Witch.
Okay.
So we didn't talk about the Dice Witch.
No, we didn't. It's okay. So let's go back to the Dice Witch.
So the Dice Witch.
Well, we can't forget the Dice Witch.
There was a stage I went through where I combined the Geek and Goddess thing, but not in a performance way. I was doing like fantasy accessories and dice blessings. So I was basically doing Reiki on dice and then doing like, gemstones that people could use to charge up their dice with certain things. And to me, it's like, it's entertainment value. Sure. I don't necessarily like, people will be like, well, can you give me a guarantee on this? Like, did you ask Jesus for a guarantee? I don't know what you want from me.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
But, so my husband was doing his game night with the guys one night, and he was at somebody else's house. I was home. He texts me, he says, so my rolls have been like really crappy. Can you do a distance charge up of my dice? And I didn't know what system he was playing, and so I was thinking it was a D20 system, and so I was envisioning 16s as I sent him Reiki for his dice. Well, he was playing a D6 system, and they kept exploding. And he's like, so I almost just TPK'd my entire party,
that's hilarious.
So can you pull back the Reiki
Let's pull it back a little bit. I think I texted you during one of our Warhammer games. I was like, look at this, and I think my die come up a negative number. You were like, I think you need to sage that. I'm like, it's a virtual die. I don't know what to do.
I missed an opportunity. We have all these moments that are like, oh, if only. So we went to, I also vended at PAX East like the year after that, which is a huge jump from a convention with like 300 people to a convention with like 75,000.
I was going to say like tens of thousands.
Total madness. But I had these videos up where I was like, ask the Dice Witch, and I had some videos up on YouTube. And Mike and Jerry from Penny Arcade had found it, and they did a comic about me as the Dice Witch. And so we went and stood in the line to get their autographs. And when we got up to the front, they recognized me. And Mike is like, "Can I get a hug?"
That's awesome.
And I'm like, I'm supposed to be the one fangirling right now. But then they did this live D&D session when they were playing. Well, we were on the road home. And he was like dying up on stage. And he's like, "Is the Dice Witch in the audience?"
You
and if I had been in the audience and gone up there and charged his dice and he like recovered, that could have made my fortune right there.
You would never have to do anything else but be the Die Witch. So close.
So now I have to sing for myself.
It is all so much about timing, right? It's like, oh, if I'd just been there at that moment. So, Council of Five Nations. What's that? For some reason, I feel like
it's a gaming convention that took place right at Proctor's in Schenectady. Right near where
I'm not really from that area, so I guess that's why.
It's one of the main theaters in the area for big touring shows and stuff. And they do small amount of vendors and lots of gaming hosted by people and like a game auction and stuff like that.
Cool.
So.
Yeah, I'm surprised I'm with my New York crew, but they're more from the Syracuse area, so that's probably why I never really heard about it. Yeah, it's a little bit of
a haul for a smaller con.
And they tended to stick local. So let's just take a quick look at the website. I mean, it is rhiannonslark.com. There's not anything.
If you can't spell, it's singinglark.com, and it'll redirect you to
That is clever. That is perfect. So here we are, and this has links to quite literally all the stuff.
Patreon, so the Kickstarter pre-save is right at the top there if you're interested in that, and everything else is on the side.
Great. Please do stop by and support.
All the stuff on Bandcamp streams for free, so you can lurk at as much of my music as you want.
No, and that's how it is these days.
Yes.
So, also occasionally, I don't think you're doing live concerts now, but quite a few of your live concerts got us through COVID while we were sitting at home doing one thing or another, either working at home or working on our own stuff. Putting on some of your shows was always a
lots coming up in the next month or so.
I
think I've got 4 or 5 live streams.
Oh, really? So you're still doing live shows? Okay, great.
I am now. Yeah.
Okay, and
it's been a bit.
You are on Twitch, which is predominantly on YouTube, and what else?
They'll show up on YouTube and Facebook at Rhiannon's Lark.
Okay. So. Yeah. Great. All right. So, any other comments or questions for Alyssa before we take a short break and set up for some music, which is what we really want to hear. Make sure I just put the microphone back on. That would be the great thing to actually hear some music. So, I'll give you the stage.
All right. So I thought I would do a couple songs off the new album since we were talking about it. And this first one is a good example of something we mentioned before, that it's sort of an intersection of the game and something personal that makes me want to write songs about it. So this is a song about that 2-year campaign where I was playing a raging barbarian. And I was also thinking a lot about my desire to get rid of stuff and sort of simplify. So this is called The Minimalist Barbarian, or Marie Kondo and the Bag of Holding. My name is Rhiannon. I'm a barbarian. I'm really handy with an axe. When I'm not swinging, you'll find me carrying a bag of holding filled with our knickknacks. Though a year ago it seemed quite nifty, I'm going to do one more for you tonight. I had mentioned before that I grew up playing games, and we did a lot of card games, and there weren't really the same, there wasn't the same selection of games available back then that there is now. So you get bored occasionally playing the same games over and over again, and so you start coming up with some house rules. This is called House Rules. Might be because the game is old. Playtesting wasn't quite the same back then. I reread the instructions and we made some deductions, but it's still not clear. So now we're faced with a choice. I can't find the answer on BGG. We can quit barely halfway, but I've taken a survey and I think it's time for house rules. They're just tools to enhance our enjoyment of the game. Let's be plain, I don't care what you say, you're in my house now. Might be because the game is flawed. One player always ends up snowballing. There's no project mechanic, now her lead is gigantic, but we can't just quit. We still got about 2 hours to play. We all sit here wondering what's the point. Games don't have to be equable, but this one's inflexible. I think it's time for house rules. They're just tools to enhance our enjoyment of the game. Let's be plain, I don't care what you say, you're in my house now. Might be because we got bored. It's definitely because we got bored. While they won't last forever, gosh, we all feel so clever laying down the laws. We won't alter theming or story. We'll just tweak a few things here and there. It's not based on ambitions, we won't change end conditions, but I think it's time for house rules. They're just tools to enhance our enjoyment of the game. Let's be plain, I don't care what you say, you're in my house now. What if we had wild cards and get rid of free discards? We could put an empty space right there, it's not out of place. Change the currency a bit, force the bonus to be split. One reroll, drop that goal. We've got more control with house rules. They're just tools to enhance our enjoyment of the game. Let's be plain, I don't care what you say. It's house rules. They're just tools to enhance our enjoyment of the game. Let's be plain, I don't care what you say, you're in my house now.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much. So let's see. Chat is super laggy. Everything's been super laggy. All right, viewers, friends. Looks might have a couple casualties of lag. If you're out there, you got anything you want to ask? Anything you want to say? Any questions for our guest?
Otherwise, we'll be forced to go drink.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're gonna
It's
have to.
tough life.
We're gonna have to hit. We're gonna have to hit some rum or mezcal if no one has any
and
questions.
play games.
Play some games. I think some people got bumped, but that's okay. But anyway, all right, don't have her into the night. So special thanks to Alyssa Yeager for coming and talking to us a little bit about her experiences and of course playing some music. Take a look at rhiannonslark.com. All her information about her latest live recording, her new album that is coming, the Kickstarters associated with it, and all the social media links, including in-person appearances and streamed appearances. By the way, I just moved to the much smaller screen than my dual screen, so I'm sitting here squinting as I'm doing this. So this is why I'm normally on a large screen. So we've got our like and subscribe links here. Thanks to everybody, as always, for tuning in, watching From the Tomes, Twitch TV, From the Tomes, at Fox and Board Games. You can find at Fox and Board Games at just about all major social media, as well as on YouTube, where there'll be exclusive content. This, by the way, will be archived on YouTube for a duration, for a long duration. We probably will not keep this here on Twitch much past its week or two of life. And thanks to everybody for tuning in, for chatting. Thanks to everybody for liking, subscribing, and supporting. And I'll see you all later in the week and next week. Thanks again for coming. I'm really thrilled. All right. Have a good night, folks.
Night.